Alex. We're here in Miami. It's a huge weekend, F1 weekend. Our guest today is Susie Wolff. She's the managing director of F1 Academy. Their goal, to get a woman onto the main grid of Formula One.
The fact that she started racing at the age of 8, I'm really interested how that's impacted her leadership skills and her vision.
Yeah, I really want to get into how she combines all these different roles of being effectively the commissioner, a role model, a coach, a mentor, and someone who has massive ambition for this fast-growing sport.
This is going to be great.
All right, let's get to it. Susie Wolff, welcome to The Deal. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Huge time here in Miami. We have so much to talk to you about, but I want to start with your core mission right now, which is getting a woman back onto the Formula One grid. It's been 50 years since it happened. You were one of the people who's probably been the closest in that intervening period. What's it going to take?
Well, it's a huge challenge, first and foremost, because the sport isn't segregated and there's only 20 spots on that Formula One grid. So regardless of gender, it's incredibly tough to make it. But one of our biggest problems is the fact that the sport is still seen as so male dominated. So we don't have enough young girls competing for the best to rise to the top. So we need to change the perceptions. We need to create role models, and we need to get more young girls entering the sport in the hope that one is good enough to make it to the very pinnacle.
And enter F1 Academy, which is your
job.
Well,
F1 Academy, we exist. It's a junior level. So it's Formula 4, which is in the pyramid, Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, then Formula 1. And we exist as a segregated championship. It's only for female drivers. And it's basically, we want to be the rocket fuel for progression. We've got some of the best junior teams in racing. And we want to find and nurture young female talent so that they have a better chance of making it to Formula 1 in the future.
So you come from a racing family. You started racing at the age of 8. Apologies, because my voice is terrible. We had a big game last night. But I always think about being an athlete all the time. You started racing at the age of 8. How has that shaped your leadership skills and the mission that Jason just described?
Massively. I think when I look back at the age of 8, I was that very competitive, ambitious little girl. I loved speed. But of course, you only do what you enjoy in the moment. You're not thinking of a career. And I wasn't the stereotypical girl racer. You know, I loved pink. I had my Barbies during sessions. But I just found this huge passion for racing and that competitive spirit. And I was taken to watch a Formula 3 race at the age of 13. And that's really when everything changed in my head. I suddenly realized, oh, I could be a racing driver. I could make it to Formula 1. And that's when it stopped being a hobby and I became quite dedicated. And I think that dedication came with a lot of sacrifice. And sometimes my parents felt maybe I was sacrificing a lot of those teenage years where you're supposed to, you know, party, meet boys. But I never felt that way. I always just loved what I was doing. And for sure, the tenacity throughout my racing career has been a huge help now when I've moved into the business side of the sport.
Susie, as a father of 2 teenage daughters, thinking of you as an 8-year-old behind a wheel, I mean, is it ever scary? Because I get scared to go on the turnpike.
I guess watching it's scary, but when you're out there and you know what it's like when you're competing, you're not thinking about any fear or any worries of what could happen. And the sport is dangerous. I was always aware that there was risks involved, but it never stopped me pushing myself to the limit. But I do think now as a parent, I have a little son, it's harder watching than it is competing.
I want to go back to your parents for a second because, you know, you come by this, it seems, this competitive spirit and this drive pretty naturally. So what did you take from them that sort of, pun intended, sort of fueled you in your competitive pursuits?
Looking back now as you get older, they shaped so much of me because, you know, my mum met my dad when she went to buy her first motorbike from his shop. She raced, but she still had her own business, and it was a dress shop business. You know, she was very elegant, but in a second could switch into her race gear and be out on track with my dad. And that for sure gave me a very good inspiration of what it could be. You can be both. And also their relationship. My dad had so much respect for my mum. They both had their own businesses. He always said, whatever he can do, mum can do too. And they were very equal, and they pushed each other and they supported each other. And growing up seeing that, it's definitely what I've managed to achieve in my own marriage, that I have a husband who also pushes me to be my best self and doesn't wrap me in cotton wool at all, but pushes me. And I have that support background, but for sure, so lucky to have the childhood that I had.
And for those who don't know, your husband is Toto Wolff, who's the CEO and team principal of Mercedes, the Mercedes team. Okay. He is all of those things. And so that notion, just, sticking with your childhood for a second, this was very natural business, or you felt at home in it.
Well, my dad always raced two wheels. He did the Isle of Man TT, which is probably the scariest, most dangerous motorbike race in the world. And he always said two wheels was too dangerous for his little girl. So he at least put me on 4 wheels.
So that's where he drew the line. Okay.
That's where he drew the line. And I got a little go-kart for my 8th birthday.
Wow. And so take us, briefly through your racing career, because we want to talk a lot about you as a business person. But, as with Alex, so much of your approach is you were an athlete, you were on the grid, and we see this come through very clearly as you're advising and mentoring these young women who are in the academy. Walk us through your racing career.
Well, I started at 8 and wasn't a clear talent initially, but had a lot of tenacity. So I kept getting better and got to quite a high level in the national championships, then the British championships, qualified for the Europeans, and by the age of 18 was ranked 15th in the world. And I was often the only girl, but never saw myself as the only girl. In my sport, you wear helmets. You don't actually see your competitors. But when I was 18, I was given an award as top female. And I think that was the first indication that I was seen as different, because I remember being embarrassed to get the award because I couldn't remember even seeing any other girls out on track. But that gave me the springboard, that good result, to move into single-seaters. So I started in Formula Renault and had quite some success, was racing against Lewis Hamilton, had some podiums, got a lot of attention because I was the first ever female to make the Young Driver of the Year award, which is a very prestigious award in Europe. And didn't win it, got nominated twice, lost it twice, but got noticed by Mercedes-Benz. And I had tried to make it into Formula 3, that category I'd seen as a young girl. But one of the difficulties in my sport is the financial barrier. You need money to go racing. You need to raise sponsorship. And I mean, I'm giving my age away here, but I had a great sponsor, British Telecom, because they were launching something called broadband. But they were a great support of mine. But when I was just starting in Formula 3, I then broke my ankle. And that was one of the toughest episodes of my career, because everything really slipped away. I lost my seat, I lost my sponsor. But I got that one phone call from Mercedes-Benz, come and test for us. And as much as people say, well, there must have been so much riding on that test, I had nothing to lose. I had nothing. So I gave it all I had, and they offered me then a 1-year contract, and I ended up staying for 7 years, and then managed to make my way into Formula 1 as a test driver, and stayed there until I realised that I wasn't going to make it into a race seat. And I think, like as an athlete, your days will be up at some point. And I very much wanted to be in control of that decision and not wait for the phone to stop ringing or a contract to be produced. So I then decided in 2016 to call it a day.
Yeah, they often say that athletes die twice, real death and when you retire. And I found that to be true. But Susie, going back to your racing days, if I look at a baseball player or a young girl that's playing softball, I truly understand what makes that player good or great or not so good. I'm a novice, so excuse the simple question. What makes a good driver?
It's definitely a combination. I think the earlier you start, you build the synapses of what it is to be fast out on a racetrack. But for sure, if you look at someone like Lewis, who's possibly the greatest of all time, incredible hand-eye coordination, incredible balance, very good peripheral vision, that you understand what's going on, you can read a race out on track. And then the ability, we say when a racing car is dancing, because in the end, you are trying to push the car to the absolute limit. And the limit is where you need to be to put the best lap time together. And it's the drivers that are able to find that very sweet spot of being on the absolute limit of what the car is capable of. And getting 2 or 3 tenths close to the front is pretty manageable. Getting to be the quickest and pole position at the very limit, that's what takes something extra special.
And so talk about that moment of transition. You know, when you make the call to get into the business side, you make it proactively. How do you map that out? What's your playbook for saying, okay, I want to be this, or I want to pursue it in this way? Like, what's your thinking there?
Well, the decision was really easy. The aftermath was, even thinking back to it now, I fell into a black hole. I initially didn't think I wanted to move into the business side of the sport because by that time Toto was very successful, winning world championships with Mercedes and Lewis. I didn't want to work against him for the sake of our marriage, but decided I didn't want to work for him also for the sake of our marriage. So I was searching for the next challenge. And I'd been approached by a gentleman I'd met once before who'd wanted me to drive for him, Gildo Pastor. And when he called regarding Formula E, this new all-electric championship, I thought he was calling me to drive for his team again. Mm-hmm. He said, no, I want you to run the team. And I thought, run a team? No, I don't see myself doing that. But suddenly some jigsaw pieces fell into place. Dieselgate happened. The electrification of the automotive industry sped up. But then suddenly it's all everybody was talking about. And I obviously heard from Toto that Mercedes were very much looking towards electrification in the future. And Formula E then gained huge momentum, all electric racing cars, which none of us had anticipated in the industry, racing in city centres. And I went to visit Gildo at a race in Brooklyn. I could see the Statue of Liberty, electric racing cars, and I thought, okay, maybe this has something. His team was racing at the back, and he had a medical issue, which meant that it had been mismanaged for a couple of years. And he said, listen, bring it back to its former glory. The team was losing a lot of money, so I decided to copy and paste my husband's deal and said, okay, don't pay me a salary, give me equity. Mm-hmm. Give me 30% of the team, I'll turn it around. And we were very bound. If he wanted to exit, I would go with him. If I wanted to, there was a lot of tag-along and drag-alongs. But he was a great partner. And I was the mother of a young baby, said, listen, I can't move to Monaco where the team was based. And he said, I'm not going to judge you how you do it. You do it and you call me if you ever need my backup. And I'll be honest, there were a few moments where I thought, what have I got myself into? Because the team was losing a lot of money, was not performing. But those were tough days, but my goodness, did I learn a lot.
So following up on what Jason said, it was losing money. You're going, did I make the right decision? I think we've all been there at some point. My question for you is, what were some of the 2 or 3 things you did to start turning the business around from losing money to making money?
First and foremost, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn trying to poach the best people from other teams. In motorsport, if you can bring someone in who's won a race, they bring so much knowledge and know-how. We then won our first race the following season, and it was a very slow turnaround, but suddenly the energy shifted. We had great people on board who knew what it was to win. They knew what it took to win, and they brought that culture. We definitely became more trustworthy of each other. I set realistic targets, not immediately expecting to be racing at the front. And slowly but surely, we built this energy. We won a race, and suddenly we thought, we can do this. And then we got a great new partner on board, a new title partner. Then more commercial partners followed, and within 3 years, we were fighting for the World Championship, and we were profitable.
Mm-hmm. So I want to fast forward a little bit because I want to get into F1 Academy and your decision to do that. It's a seismic moment, truly, in this rapid growth story that's happening around Formula One. So tell us about getting that call. I assume it's from Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of F1 Academy, who you obviously know well, has been in the business for a long time. What is that conversation like? How does it start?
Well, we had sold the Formula E team, Gilles and myself, and he's a visionary, and he was looking to move into the space industry. He wanted to build an electric rover to go on Mars. And I was really intrigued by the technology, really thought it would be great to get out of motorsport and push myself out of my comfort zone. So I was quite far along on that journey. And
you were literally headed to space.
I was headed to space. And I got a call from Stefano and Greg Maffei. They were at the Mexican Grand Prix.
Greg Maffei, who was then the CEO of Liberty Media.
Yeah. And they said, listen, we're thinking of starting an all-female racing series. I said, fantastic, it would be great, and anything I can help with in the background. And they said, no, you're going to run this for us. And there was a transition period because I definitely didn't see myself doing that. But after a lot of discussions at home, realised it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The sport that I knew so well, having been a driver, I knew all the challenges on being in a racing seat and how tough it could be. And I knew the business side of it. And very much felt, well, if I didn't take this opportunity and didn't hand the baton to the next generation and try to make it better, I would probably always regret it.
What were your reservations? What was your skepticism?
My skepticism was, did we need an all-female championship to help? The sport isn't segregated. Is it right only to segregate at one level? And then the championship had already been set up to race on separate from F1. And racing on an empty racetracks with no spectators was going to always be difficult to make it a commercial asset for Liberty and ultimately Formula One. So I knew there had to be a completely different business model. And there had been a series that had tried and failed before,
Right.
which had contacted me several times. And I never understood their business model, but I knew it wasn't easy to make something like F1 Academy into a viable commercial model.
So those were the kind of challenges. What turned you?
What turned me was their enthusiasm. I went to New York, I met with some of the Liberty board and realised they were going to put their money where their mouth was. And I had spent so long in motorsport talking about diversity, panel after panel after panel. I kind of felt I'd said all there was to be said, but here was the owners of the pinnacle of the sport willing to put in a lot of investment to create a platform that would help female talent on and off track. And I realised this wasn't just a box-ticking exercise. It wasn't just we better do this because, we've got a huge female fan base now. They really meant it, and they've followed through it. They've given full support every step of the way, and I don't ever regret having made the decision.
So one quick follow-up. You talked about it was losing money at the beginning. Who funded F1 Academy? And have you raised or will you raise capital?
We haven't raised capital. I don't think there's any plans to. It's been fully funded by Formula One. And now, of course, we managed to get the 10 Formula One teams on board who are stakeholders of the sport alongside Formula One. And now we are very close to creating a platform which is financially sustainable over the long term. And I do believe women's sport, it's attracting a lot of investment, but I do think it has to come to the stage where it's also a business model. And thankfully, because of the huge interest that we're seeing, we're close to being there.
Yeah. Talk to us about getting those 10 on board, because I would imagine that's got to be one of the trickiest things. You have a lot of knowledge about all of those teams. What was the process like of corralling, cajoling them into really supporting?
It was interesting because when I first arrived, I said to Stefano, I'm going to need a couple of months to go away and really figure out what I think is going to work and dive deeper into kind of research and data. So I spoke to a lot of governing bodies. I spoke to all my contacts from the world of karting. Why are we not seeing more young girls? What do we need to do to just get lots of different opinions and form my own opinion as to what was the right thing to do. And it was one discussion with Fred Vasseur, who's a team principal at Ferrari and a good friend. And he had a young female driver in his driving in his Ferrari Academy. And he said, listen, we can put her in F1 Academy and we could paint the car red. Suddenly I thought, yeah, you could. And so could all of the other teams.
Yeah.
He said, well, I don't know about that, but, I can try, I can speak. And I said, Fred, that's given me a really good idea. We're going to get every team to take a car. So I got,
because sorry to interrupt you, but that wasn't the original plan.
No, the series had been set up racing separate from Formula One, and the budgets of the drivers were covered by the driver, the team, and 1/3 by Liberty. So I got home that evening. I said to Toto, I'm going to get every team to take a livery. I said, impossible. We will never get all 10 teams, A, to agree, and B, to sign the same legal document.
Right.
I said, yeah, you're right. It might be a challenge, but actually the support that I had when I had all of the individual meetings, they all very much had the same reply. we've got one shot to get this right if we're going to do this. I mean, bearing in mind the first time in the history of the sport that the Formula One teams were giving their name and livery to something outside of the cars they built, and for an all-female category, it was bold. But we managed to get the top 3 teams. So Zach was one of the first to come on board with McLaren. I had Ferrari. And then one by one, I managed to get to the number 6. Toto, of course, always said, you need to get more than 5 and then I can come on board. Then I got Mercedes, and I won't mention any names. Some were not that enthused, but I had more than half. And I said to them, well, we're going to launch and you're either with us or you're not. And I think the way the world is, they didn't want to be seen to not be supporting. But now I have to say, I have a great relationship with all 10 teams, and they've been fully supportive.
Who had the most reservation? Who was the hardest to get?
It would be unfair to name names. Let's just say they took quite some convincing, but they're fully on board now.
Well, I mean, and I would imagine, Alex, you've seen this. I mean, it is and this does get to sort of the macro of women's sports right now, that when people see the proof, and the proof really is in the numbers, the proof is in the viewership, the proof is in the sponsorship dollars. I mean, what was for the unnamed who weren't, as enthusiastic, what convinced, other than peer pressure, was there something that you used, a number or an argument that convinced them?
I think a big part was peer pressure.
Yeah.
But when I went to meet with each and every team, I very much said, don't view me as a woman running a women's thing. This is for the greater good of our sport.
Right.
And this can be something hugely impactful and powerful in a really positive way. Because thanks to Netflix and Drive to Survive, 42% of the F1 fan base is female. The fastest growing fan demographic, the 18 to 24-year-old female. So there's a huge audience. And I think the teams realized that there was this massive shift, and there was this younger female audience that was really getting into the sport. And it was about showing that the sport they loved wanted to create opportunity for women, and wanted to show that the sport isn't any longer as male dominated as maybe it was once perceived to be. So I think that was part of the reason, but also I respected their reservations. It was bold. My vision was bold. It was going to take a lot to pull it off. It was a tough time to get it done, but we got it done. And then as soon as we announced it, it was time to try and get on the F1 calendar.
Right.
Stefano gave me huge support to meet with all the promoters. Again, not all of them were hugely enthusiastic, but some were. And I got half a calendar, and Stefano helped me to get a few more on to make a full calendar. And now that's not an issue anymore. So that initial maybe skepticism, I think, has completely shifted, because we're up, we're running, and people can see that it's having impact.
Susie, being involved with the WNBA and team ownership with the Lynx in Minnesota, over the last several years, we've seen this incredible amount of increase in interest, in dollars pouring into sponsorship and marketing. And then on the back end, the ROI has been incredible because the viewerships have never been better. But in your position as a leader of the academy, how do you think you can capitalize on the influx of capital coming into women's sports?
Well, we're lucky in that I never needed to look for investment. I never needed to go out and prove the business case, because I had all the support I needed from Formula One and Liberty. But I do think to be successful in the long term, first and foremost, we need to create great racing. We need to create something that people want to watch, because they shouldn't feel obliged to watch because it's the female category. We need to come to a race weekend and be a great addition. Promoters have to see the value of having F1 Academy. And then on the other side, if we get that extra viewership, if we get those extra eyeballs, commercially, we have a very strong proposition. And the two are so closely interlinked, and it's really that vicious circle. You can't really have one without the other. But suddenly we managed to get a lot of the F1 broadcasters also showing F1 Academy. Now we have our own Netflix docuseries. Suddenly we do have that reach. So for the commercial partners and for the teams, it's a real business case to go out to their partners and sponsors and say, okay, well, F1 Academy makes sense. Not only are we doing something that's good for the sport in supporting female drivers, but it's actually a return on investment for us. And I think the two had to go hand in hand. And it's been definitely lucky timing as well. The world changed, women's sport had this huge moment, and Formula One had this huge surge in popularity. And I do think all three came together that it gave us at F1 Academy a good shot at success, for sure.
So, Susie, when it comes to sponsorship, I mean, one of the ones that obviously jumps out when it comes to F1 Academy is Charlotte Tilbury. Not a natural name that we would associate with motorsports. Talk to us about how that deal comes about, because the car itself really jumps out, but even the association is notable. How does that happen?
Well, once I'd had the great idea of bringing in all the assets in-house and owning the liveries and commercializing them centrally, I woke up on the 1st of January last year and realized, okay, I've got 6 liveries I need to sell, and the first race is in kind of 8 weeks. But there had been a friend of mine throughout my racing career who had been in touch. She knew Charlotte Tilbury and said, listen, Charlotte would like to support a driver. So I immediately picked up the phone and said, listen, don't support a driver, become a partner of F1 Academy. And it was one of those phone calls, it was with their head of partnerships, where 10 minutes in, we just knew we were going to get a deal.
Wow.
We were so aligned. They wanted to move into women's sport. Their whole mantra is empowerment, see it, believe it, do it. And I very much wanted to bring in a female-founded, female-focused brand. I wanted to break down the stereotype that, well, to be taken seriously as a racing driver, you had to be like a tomboy. No, if you want to turn up at the track in a face full of makeup, you can, or with no makeup. That doesn't reflect on your ability as a driver. And we were just so aligned from the get-go. It was a challenging deal to piece together because Formula One was used to huge deals with oil companies, with logistics companies, and this had to be pieced together in a very different way. And when I called Stefano and said, it's a brand called Charlotte Tilbury, he was like, who? I said, can you ask your wife? And I could hear him, Sylvia. And he's like, okay. He said, I trust you. If you think we've got to do this, then let's do it. And we got the deal done. And I said, okay, you have a livery to design. And they sent me through the livery with these hot lips plastered all over the race car with lipsticks hanging out. I thought, oh my God, this is going to create a lot of attention, maybe not all of it positive. But I knew it had a real impact when my stepdaughter, she's studying in LA, not really interested in motorsport. She called me and she said, you've just done a deal with Charlotte Tilbury. That is so cool.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if we've reached a dorm over in LA, it means we've done something right. And it just blew up.
Yeah. And so what does a deal like that do in terms of not just drawing attention, but maybe changing the conversation with other sponsors? Or does it?
The amount of brands who I've spoken to have said, well, I want to do just what Charlotte Tilbury did. Let's copy and paste that deal. Because she came in and really disrupted. And we wanted someone to disrupt, to come at it differently. You know, in our Paddock Club area, we have a makeup station. We wanted to challenge what had always been the status quo in racing. Let's do it differently. Let's not be ashamed of our femininity. We can still be here and be taken seriously as women and celebrating being women. So it was that partnership which really was the foundation for others coming on board. Tommy Hilfiger was one of the first to call and say, how can I support? And also took a livery. And then slowly but surely we got most of the cars sold. And now I'm in a great position where I don't have enough cars left anymore for the demand. But I keep my feet firmly on the ground. You know, we've had a huge success in a short space of time. But we need to keep making sure that we're making the right decisions for the longer term, that we're still making sure that we're evolving in the right way for these young girls up and coming to see the opportunity and to really grab the opportunity.
So, Susie, you brought up a really interesting point when you were talking about the Charlotte Tilbury deal and the makeup station in the paddock. And it's really cool, Alex, when you go and see a race weekend that has F1 Academy as part of it, because it is both a part of the larger event, obviously, and then its own sort of separate space. But I would imagine that that's a careful balance that you have to strike, right? You know, to appeal to the broader fan base, but also bring in, how do you do that? I mean, that must be something you're thinking about all the time.
It's definitely a balancing act because we are a junior championship. We're very lucky to race alongside F1, which is so established with a huge fan base. But we don't want to be a little sister in the room. We're there to take our space, to own it, to disrupt, to be bold, but in a way where it's respecting the bigger picture. Just because we're women, someone said, oh, it's not fair that, the F1 teams have the best paddock and you're off in the support paddock. I said, no, it absolutely is, because that's the pinnacle of the sport. And that's Formula One. And we're not here to disrupt what is a great, great sport. We're here to be an addition, and we're here to build up young talent that can hopefully progress. But it's definitely a balancing act of being taken seriously and of owning it, but then also understanding of where we fit in the bigger ecosystem.
Okay, so we are, if you don't mind, we're going to role play a little bit. Okay. Jason, Mr. Kelly, is a CEO in a Fortune 100 company.
Okay.
He's very interested in giving you some dollars. Give me your 30-second pitch on what is the value proposition to Jason and his company partnering with you.
You are really putting me on the spot here, Alex. I will give it my best shot.
I'm his assistant.
Well, we would love you to come on the journey with us, because F1 Academy is something that is young. It's only in its second season, but we've had huge impact in what is such a big global established sport. And we believe we can change the perceptions. We believe there's a great opportunity for your brand to appear on an F1 Grand Prix weekend and sit alongside huge names in the sport, but be seen as supporting something which is having huge positive impact in our sport to create change. We have great broadcasters. We have great audiences now watching F1 Academy, and we would love to have you on board with us.
Boom.
Is
All
that
right.
30 seconds?
That's
or did I
good.
go over?
Perfect.
That's good. I have follow-ups. I'm getting there. I'm almost convinced. But tell me about your audience. Like, tell me how how your audience is similar to Formula One. Who are you bringing in? Who am I going to reach that I wouldn't otherwise reach?
We're definitely reaching a younger audience. I mean, obviously with the demographic that Formula One is now hitting, it's younger than it's ever been. But we see that we have nearly 70% of a female audience. So less than, or let's say more females in Formula One. And we're definitely hitting an audience which isn't already in motorsport. It's an audience that's coming upon F1 Academy as something different, as something new. And it's not just your, let's say, average motorsport fan. And that's quite exciting, because if you're already in the sport and you have that viewership, but we are attracting something which is not already known to the sport.
So I think we want to sign a 5-year deal, but Jason's the best 5-year. Okay. So how does it look today versus where you see this in 5 years? Because we're in it for the long run with you.
Well, that's great to hear. But we are definitely got huge ambitions for it to be bigger and better in the future. But I've always said we can't run before we can walk. It's going to be a step by step. And I think one is the educational piece. We need more people to understand what F1 Academy is. I would love your daughters to say to you, oh, it's not F1 just this weekend, or F1 Academy is coming to Miami, that there is this education that we exist and that we are a great spectacle, a great sport to watch alongside Formula One. And we're not there yet. We've still got a lot of work to do to build up that wider audience, to make sure that we are attracting the next generation audience, those young girls, the 8 to 12-year-olds. If they can see a female driver zipping up a Ferrari or a Red Bull or a Mercedes race suit, it will change her perceptions of what's possible. So we've definitely got to make sure that we continue to get that reach. And one of the big moments for us will be our Netflix docuseries, because I do think that's could be a game changer for us.
All right, we're done role playing. That was fun.
Ooh,
You got your
goodness.
deal. You got your
I got my
deal
deal.
with, A&J Incorporated, the Deal LLC. Netflix. I mean, you cannot talk to anyone about Formula One. You really can't talk to anyone about sports and media without talking about the Netflix effect and Drive to Survive and everything that it did for Formula One. So now, here comes F1 Academy, your own Netflix series, but with a twist. You're in business with Reese Witherspoon and Hello Sunshine. Tell us how all of this comes about, because it feels, in retrospect, obvious, but it's never that easy, I'm sure.
No, it's never that easy, but it was a partnership that I felt was meant to be. I think Hello Sunshine and what Reese created with Hello Sunshine, trying to tell the women's stories in a way that hadn't been done before. It fitted so well with F1 Academy and our story. And the timing was quite opportune for them to say, okay, it was still a risk because when they came on board, we were racing on empty racetracks. There wasn't really the momentum that we have now. But they were very committed. They could see the potential and they very much wanted to do more in women's sport. So I would say it was a leap of faith from their side. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the way the series progressed was very favourable, getting the teams on board, racing with F1. And then we had to find a streaming partner. And it was always clear for me I wanted it to be Netflix because I wanted to be in the F1 paddock. I wanted to have the team principals as part of our story because they were the people I dealt with every week. And I also wanted people to see how much support F1 was giving F1 Academy. And the negotiations started and we had more than one that was interested and that led to us getting a deal quite quickly with Netflix. And then it was, for me, really a voyage of discovery. I very much wanted this to appeal to people that weren't in the motorsport bubble. Mm-hmm. And I had to sometimes take a step back because I don't think I'm the right person. I know too much about
You're not the target audience. Yeah.
I'm not the target audience. But it was a really interesting journey of trying to create something which we felt was compelling viewing, but also did justice to how credible and how important F1 Academy is in the bigger scale.
Yeah.
I think we have such a great opportunity with this series coming out. Obviously, we hope people will enjoy it. I say, even if we can have a fraction of the success that Drive to Survive did, it will be a game changer for us.
So tell us about it, sort of that compare and contrast, because I mean, you had a front row seat. Your husband, Toto Wolff, was notably very skeptical about Drive to Survive from the beginning. Mercedes didn't participate in the first season. He's talked very openly about how he got that one wrong, and obviously has become a key character. You obviously have appeared on Drive to Survive a number of times in your various roles around the sport. What did you learn from being featured in that series that impacted or affected how you think about this series about F1 Academy?
It was quite a challenge because the Formula One teams and drivers and team principals are all very established. We have 15 unknown drivers who are at the very beginning of their journey. They're not established superstars yet.
They're literally teenagers in some cases.
They're literally young women who have been given this incredible opportunity. And for some of them, it was quite a big challenge to suddenly be with cameras everywhere on a Formula One race weekend. And we had to protect them in a way that we weren't being too intrusive, but we needed to see the drama. We needed to see the human stories. And because we're not in the F1 paddock, the cameras could go everywhere and they managed to capture, for me, quite emotional to watch back to see how tough it was for some of the drivers, and definitely made me question a couple of things that we can do to improve it for the young drivers. Because it is tough. You're suddenly in the limelight, and as much as you need that exposure and that limelight to help you in your career, suddenly there was a 17-year-old signed to a Formula One team racing 2 hours before Formula One, and just 1 year previously she was karting. So it was a big step up, but I felt very sure that we needed to create that exposure and we needed to create this disruption to get the eyeballs in the audience and to create that impact. So it was definitely a learning process. And then, of course, the balance between how much of the racing did people want to see. Was it more the drama off track? I didn't want it to look like a girly, reality TV show. These were serious young racing drivers that had to be taken seriously on screen. But I have to say, Hello Sunshine and Netflix it was really a privilege to work with both teams because we always had the eye on the bigger picture and the balancing act of doing it credit in the right way, but trying to create something that people enjoy watching.
When you watch this show, it's fascinating because, there are a lot of people who, run leagues or run teams who, they're a little bit, removed from the action. Knowing this guy and knowing how passionate he is about the pursuit of excellence on court, on field, whatever, you have sat in these seats. And so you have this very intimate and emotional relationship with these drivers that may be, I dare say, different from maybe another executive. Is that fair?
Definitely, definitely. And there's moments where if I see a driver that's had a bad qualifying or a bad race, I can sympathize so much with how she's feeling. If a driver's under immense pressure because the results haven't come, I know what that feels like. But on the other side, I remember here last year, Abby Pulling, she stood on the podium at the Miami Grand Prix weekend, and I thought, to have that opportunity, I'd never had the chance to ever even close to Formula One when I was a young racing driver. So the idea that we've created that opportunity fills me with pride, but there's definitely, for me, a real emotional part. And I obviously have to try and stay a little bit detached from the drivers because I don't want to ever show favoritism, but I definitely have passed the baton on. And I have a new head of talent development who I can see when a driver's struggling, or I can see when there's an issue, and I always say, okay, you got to go and speak to her and these issues, and I can pass on all the mistakes that I want them to avoid that I made, and all of the things which, looking back, I could have done better. I love that I can pass that knowledge on.
You must feel that.
I do. And I got to tell you, Jason and I were speaking before you walked in, and we were talking about how great that first episode was.
Thank you.
It was really, really good. And I can relate so much with you because as you kind of walked in as the boss, when I entered the New York Yankees in 2004, I had another boss, and his name was George Steinbrenner.
Literally the boss.
The boss. And it was like this reverence and like this ultimate respect. And I saw those young ladies, and of course I think of my daughters, the way they look at you. Have you ever thought and pinched yourself the impact you're making in these young ladies' life, whether they make it to F1 eventually or whether they go on to be an executive like you?
I don't stop to think about it. I can see that they take on board a lot of what my opinions are, and when I give them advice. And I certainly feel sometimes I'm sitting in a room full of men and we're discussing F1 Academy, and they all have opinions, and sometimes I have to hold myself back because I think, well, you're not a woman. You've never driven a racing car, and you're trying to tell me that this is how it needs to be. But I respect the other opinions because I think sometimes it's different perspectives, which can also open my eyes to new things. But I love what I do. I love the fact that I'm creating something which is giving these young drivers an opportunity that I could only ever have dreamed of, and that the sport that I love has made this possible.
It's interesting when you say that, Susie, because I think I have some sense from your stories about what you're up against a lot of these times. And I do wonder, in your mind, like, are there times when you just think, God, this is exhausting? Like, why are they just like banging on doors or beating your head against the wall, whatever, metaphor you want to use? Like, does it sometimes just feel like this is ridiculous that I have to work this hard for something that's so obvious?
Absolutely. There's definitely been moments where I thought, oh, have I got this? Have I got it in me to keep going?
Yeah.
But I think it's from my racing career, that tenacity, that never giving up and being so close to achieving what I want to achieve. But there are days where it just exhausts me, the endless conversations and not being able to actually make things happen, just talking about. So yeah, that there are, but I think everyone has those tough days.
Sure. So it does feel like in these first 2 years, there have seemingly been moments, I'm sort of flipping the question on its head when I said, are there frustrating moments? Have there been moments, a moment or two, where you've thought, we're doing something real here. This is happening.
It was the biggest moment for me was Jeddah last year, where I had few people with reservations that we should be racing in Jeddah because it was such a dangerous and fast racetrack. To which my answer was, well, if men can race it, women can race it. That shouldn't be a consideration. But it was the first time I'd seen the 10 Formula One teams with their own liveries. It was the first time I'd seen our partners with their own liveries. We put all 16 cars on the grid to take a picture. I had the Netflix crew following me with Hello Sunshine. And that was a moment where I suddenly got a bit emotional because all of that hard work, it had come to life. We were at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. There was those 16 cars, all with their liveries, these young women with their race suits ready to go. And that was a very, very proud moment.
And so what's the next leap forward? I mean, what's the next big milestone for you and for the team? You're 2 years in at this point. You're racing around the world. Does it expand to the grid? Is it about individual drivers? Is it all of the above? Like, what do you game plan out when you're doing those strategic conversations? What are you thinking about?
It's really important for me that our champion goes on to success in the sport, that the best female that we've identified can go back in and mix it at the front in a normal championship, because the sport isn't segregated. And our champion last year had her first race a couple of weeks ago and nearly finished on the podium. Such an important sign for us that we are at the level where these young women can compete and do have a chance of making it to the top. So the progression up the ladder is really important for our long-term success, as much as getting more young women racing, because we need to increase the talent pool. And when I go to kart tracks, and my son had his first race a couple of weeks ago, and there was a girl fighting for the race win, and that's normal for him. He doesn't question a young girl being out on track with him and being really competitive. And that's changed. There's so many more young girls racing because now they have a clear target. Well, I want to get to F1 Academy. And we need both to function for F1 Academy to be successful long term.
All right, we're going to move to rapid fire. No pressure.
Here we go.
Ready.
Well, I just did a pitch in 30 seconds, so I kind of feel I'm
come
prepared.
on, you're good. You've got this. What's one word to describe your deal-making style?
Authentic.
What's more important to you, your gut or data?
Gut.
Who's your dream deal-making partner?
Toto.
Oh, good one.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received on deal making or business?
Always have another option. Don't fight to make the one deal work.
What's the worst advice you've been given?
The deal has to happen at any cost.
What's your hype song before a big meeting or negotiation?
Don't stop believing.
Good one.
As we've talked about, you have a new docuseries out on Netflix, F1 The Academy. What's your favorite sports documentary of all time, other than that?
I love the Michael Jordan basketball. What was it called?
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance was fantastic.
If you can only watch one sport for the rest of your life, which one is it?
Formula One.
What team do you want to see win a championship more than any?
Oh, the Scottish rugby team. They need to
There you
win
go.
something finally.
What's your advice for someone who wants to have a career just like yours?
Go for it. I think quite often it's taking that first step, which is the hardest. But I think you need to believe in yourself and simply go for it.
Boom.
Susie Wolff, this has been such a treat.
I survived.
You did it. Listen, you were one of the first people I thought of when we started this show. I really have watched your career with a lot of admiration, as I said, and really grateful to you for spending some time with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you both
Thank
for
you.
having me.